Are we live on the webinar too? Nate? Okay. Okay, great. So our next presentation is Lekha Knuffman from the National Wildlife Federation. Dr. Knuffman is the Agricultural Program Coordinator at National Wildlife Federation, and in that role she works on a number of projects and campaigns, including the Cover Crop Champions Program, grassland conservation, bioenergy, and wildlife conservation on working lands. Prior to this, she conducted research funded by the National Science Foundation on farmer decision-making in semi-arid regions of India on groundwater extraction for irrigation. Lekha has spent a number of years understanding the decision-making process and creation of environmental subjectivities of people, particularly producers on working lands. Dr. Knuffman has a doctorate in resource planning and behavior from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and a master's degree in environmental sustainability from the University of Edinburgh. I studied there. That's cool. From Edinburgh, Scotland, sorry, and a bachelor's degree in economics from Fergusson College in India. So welcome, Lekha.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. I always hate going right after lunch, so I'll keep it quick and short. I-35, the Monarch Highway, we're in the very, very early stages of where the state departments of transportation along I-35 have decided to come together and jointly undertake this idea of of I-35 being the Monarch Highway. And I'm going to go through in the next few slides, what the process has been so far and what's the status and what's coming up on the project. But before that, I just wanted to briefly touch on what the opportunities are here. So DOTs are, large landowners. They tend, in some states, even the largest, and also have a really vast public face. And so it's a great opportunity to really expand, outreach to the public around rights of way as habitat, and also actually maximize efforts to put in habitat, especially in these corridors. So this, the I-35 project could be a really cool way to create kind of a flagship habitat corridor for north-south migrations, such as the monarch butterfly. So before I even get started with that, I want to talk about just a brief history of introduction, I guess, for a lot of you to National Wildlife Federation. We're one of the country's largest conservation organizations. We're celebrating our 80th year this year. We have over 6 million members and affiliates and supporters around the country. We have state affiliates in every state. So National Wildlife Federation, we work on habitat conservation, but also education and awareness. A lot of you will be familiar with some of our youth publications like Ranger Rick. Yeah, we're those guys. We also do, some people have been mentioning to me, with our other Monarch work, we have like our Mayor's Monarch Pledge that now almost 180 cities around the country mayors have taken the pledge. And we also, do certified wildlife habitat, garden for wildlife programs, etc. So with that, let me show you a map that most of you have seen before. So this map outlines the north-south migration of the eastern monarch population to Mexico and the Midwest, and to California in the West. Some of the most crucial habitat for monarch production is in the Midwest, and this is also where a large part of the monarch breeding habitat, that's milkweed, has been lost. So again, this is in large measure because of overuse of pesticides and conversion to row cropping, etc. And also conventional gardening practices in our suburbs and urban areas. So the important thing to notice in this map is, well, don't get confused by the red dotted kind of bulbous circle. That just is, pointing out the high monarch production area. What the map really shows is how the only interstate marked on this map, I-35, is, right through that central flyway of the Monarch migration. So this would be a great interstate system to use as a kind of a public outreach and education, and also put in significant habitat along the highway. So that's a little bit of the background. And then to just kind of place where what's been going on in the last year or two. And also to give a shout out to some of the big leaders in the conservation effort. So Monarch Joint Venture and Monarch Watch and other organizations have really been leaders in monarch conservation for a number of years, and really have the science and education based approaches behind a lot of the work we're trying to do. MJV releases the annual count on monarch populations overwintering in Mexico. Monarch Watch has quantified the hectares of milkweed or potential habitat loss each year, and are also a source of milkweed plugs. But also in Washington, 2014, the presidential executive order came out on pollinators, and federal strategy was announced in May 2015, and to promote the health of pollinators. And there was also additionally a trilateral agreement, again, all things mentioned before this morning, between US, Mexico, and Canada, where the US Fish and Wildlife Service was identified as the lead agency for the US national effort. Also, National Wildlife Federation partnered with Fish and Wildlife Service with a MOU in early 2015 for this national plan, and that's sort of how we have been brought into the national effort. Okay, so finally, the Monarch Highway. So you saw this map already in Bonnie's presentation this morning, and the goal of the Monarch the Highway is restoring habitat and building a way to, engage with the public, large landowners, and to connect habitat corridor through DOT lands, and also to raise the profile of rights of way as habitat. So this map outlines the old Prairie Passage. You'll notice in Minnesota, it was, I can't make this pointer. Yeah, in Minnesota, it'll actually continue to be I-35, not I-90, which was the old Prairie Passage route. Bonnie touched on this earlier, but this is why actually the DOTs were so willing to take on the Monarch Highway, because they'd had, these same 6 DOTs had had the experience of going through the Prairie Passage effort. With the Prairie Passage effort, most of them had like wildflower plantings and other activities that they've experienced, and they also have met since then and now have talked about sort of what they saw as things that were lacking with that previous effort that they would like to really address proactively with this new effort. So, kind of a lack of long-term coordination or joint promotional activities, and a sort of kind of tapered down or limited public outreach and education. So these are all concerns that the DOTs are raising kind of at the get-go now with the Monarch Highway. And of course, funding was, an issue then, and it's still an issue now. And so I think here, this is, exactly why external or partners like National Wildlife Federation, Monarch Watch, Adopt a Highway, Fish and Wildlife Service, and other groups are coming together, and we can really help with this effort. So the important thing to realize here, though, that the Monarch Highway concept, it's a DOT-led effort. They met last fall in September in Des Moines, or early October in Des Moines, and it was the roadside managers from all 6 states, hosted by Fish and Wildlife Service, and they kind of had a technical workshop to go through kind of a day and a half of really laying out the obstacles they see with this plan, how they would respond to some of those obstacles, the help they need with certain things that they just don't have the resources or abilities to do. And following this, the White House hosted in December of last year kind of a transportation summit, and it wasn't just limited to I-35 states, it was for all DOTs, and they had significant representation, and that actually they tried to bring in the really top level decision makers, or the secretaries or commissioners for the state DOTs, and they got the I-35 project and other states projects got I think a little bit more wind in their sails, and so following that, the 6 I-35 states in May this year just signed their memorandum of understanding, agreeing to they didn't want to call it designate, because that would have to then go through 6 different legislatures to officially be designated the Monarch Highway, but they have agreed to refer to I-35 as the Monarch Highway and undertake some joint activities. Now, the MOU, of course, is non-binding, but they are going to now meet at the upcoming Midwestern Association of State Highway Transportation Authorities, I guess. MASHTO, they have their meeting in August in Minneapolis. And that's where the 6 states are going to have a Monarch Highway workshop for a day and a half, and they're going to really try to, I think, discuss the next steps to actually start work on this effort. So the main goals, I guess, for the meeting are, what are the next steps? And what's been really cool about it is that National Wildlife Federation, the White House, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Monarch Watch, and Adopt a Highway have all been invited to the table to sort of, or at least parts of it, to help with the plans and kind of present to the state DOTs some of what we think could work or what might be obstacles, and get feedback from them, but just kind of show them how the public or community-based organizations could interact with DOTs around that, this effort to really strengthen the impact and success. So some of the ideas that the DOTs are considering is the idea of demonstration gardens in their rest areas. So NWF just did a kind of short survey with the 6 DOTs, and most of them responded that rest areas are really where they see having a lot of impact initially, at least. These DOTs tend to have between 1/4 of an acre to maybe 40, 60 acres in some rest areas. But most rest areas, they have at least a small patch that they could put in. And they want to do demonstration gardens that, they would certify through a number of different programs, an example being our National Wildlife Federation Certified Wildlife Habitat. But they would do that, but then also in the larger areas beyond the actual rest area building where there would be foot traffic, they have these open spaces that they're happy to actually put in some, significant prairie plantings. And that might not be as open to the public or as reachable, but that could be some significant habitat patches. So, So that's one. And again, rest areas are easy to work in. They're not on the side of the road, so there's not as many safety issues with bringing in, contractors or volunteers or whoever to do these plantings. So that's something the DOTs are interested in. Demonstration gardens are can be a really powerful tool to reach out to the public and actually show them things they can take home and do themselves in their own backyard and in their gardens, and actually put those extra tiny spots on the map, like how Doug showed us with his corridor connections. So, and then the other is, the right-of-way plantings, where they would potentially think about putting in prairie strips that would not just be milkweed and wildflowers, but also native grasses. And I think, a lot of these DOTs reported that they already have milkweed in their right-of-way, but then they also have a lot of other stuff. And how to deal with that has been a big concern. And so some of the, points that came out of the Iowa workshop last year and things that they're still working on is coming up with some of these best management practices. And, the Federal Highway and Xerxes Society resource of the best management practices has been really, really, I think, well received, and a resource that's continued to be used. So I think of course, again, with these prairie plantings, it's not something they're considering for the safety zone right next to the pavement, but more like away in the high banks or in the ditches. And the plan would be, I guess, to do really tightly packed strips. Of course, not all along the 1,568-mile stretch of highway, but in, specific sites. So that's another extra layer of cost and time of doing site surveys along the entire highway, and something that they're considering. And then here's where so groups like ours are really, I think, important to the DOT effort, is expanding beyond the highway. One of the major issues DOTs have faced and continue to face is with, illegal mowing and haying in their right-of-way, and persistent messaging about, like, removing this type safe with milkweed, removing this weed from productive working lands. And that messaging is going to be really hard to reverse, and the DOTs themselves just don't feel as capable of taking that task on, but realize it's very critical to the success of maintaining their projects. So the Federal Highway best management practices that I've mentioned a couple of times, and Bonnie mentioned, they've really identified forming partnerships with public agencies and private organizations to provide education and outreach opportunities to the public as really critical. And so that's, we're all very encouraged that the DOTs are choosing to include us right from the beginning and are open to partnering with all of us. So I think this is also a great opportunity for a working group such as this to, reach out to your own, in your state or in your locality, your DOT or, county roadside managers, etc., and try to figure out ways, and we hope to do this at the I-35 level, try to really figure out ways of engaging with right-of-way adjacent landowners immediately. And then also promoting the state DOT efforts in a wider area than just the highway, so like way beyond the highway, maybe even like up to 100 miles beyond the highway. And, encourage sort of the practices that they are also undertaking that other, landowners and the public can undertake, with your reduced mowing, preventing invasives, spot spraying, grazing intensity, etc., as it affects the right-of-way, but also like edge of field and your own private lands. So some of those activities are things that we are already sort of outlining and hope to present to the DOTs in August as ways that, actually actionable steps we can undertake right away by working with them. So one of the partners in this that we are partnering with is Adopt a Highway. And the idea, and I think it got brought up earlier in the discussion group, was the idea of an adopt a habitat approach. Adopt a Highway is really enthused by this, and they already have a partnership with, or a contract. Adopt a Highway is a for-profit corporation, so they have contracts. And they have a contract with Texas DOT to do wildflower plantings, and that's like a first for them. So it's a new thing that they're getting into, but they're very excited to take on, that kind of role. And then, we've touched on a lot of these strategies already in our discussions, but, working with USDA to connect like state NRCS with like what the DOT is trying to do, and some of those partnerships, depending on which state you're talking about, already exist because, some of the funding for the seed mixes comes from a pot where they have to follow NRCS rules about their seed mixes. So that kind of connection is already there, but like helping them strengthen those could be, could be a powerful strategy. So at National Wildlife Federation, I've mentioned some of our current efforts around monarchs. There are 179 cities that have taken the Mayor's Monarch Pledge. Milwaukee was the 179th this week. So that's exciting. A lot of these cities are in the central flyway of the monarch migration. So, connecting those cities with our partnership with the DOT in those specific states and bringing them to the table could be, it's been shown that we've found that in some of our city meetings, the DOT, if they're not in the room, get blamed for a lot of stuff. But when they're in the room, there's some really great conversations and, continued partnering. So we're helping in that way itself already. So there's also the state summits have been, monarch summits have been mentioned, but so I want to give an example of we're helping host some of these summits. So we did one last year for Missouri, and the Missouri group is like very active and already have their monarch plan together, but they included the DOT in that summit, and that has led to now the DOT actually, Missouri DOT putting in some prairie planting spots that they weren't considering before, or just really getting involved. So that's been a cool thing to see. And then I just want to also quickly mention our Million Pollinator Garden Challenge that is not just NWF, but a number of partners. And it's a website. You can go to this website and like put in your, your garden details and be a part of this network. And you'll have, you can use then the Million Pollinator Garden Challenge logo and do outreach around that, and again, connect with some of your state partners or local partners. And so finally, DOTs have already partnered in some great ways and have, like we saw from Bonnie's presentation this morning, they've been doing things for a number of years, but also in the recent past, they've been some partnerships with DOTs and other conservation organizations, and it's not just on I-35 or in the Midwest, it's elsewhere. So for example, Virginia DOT has this great partnership with Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy and Dominion Power. So it's like the DOT, a utility, and a wildlife conservation group, and they're doing plantings in rest areas and right-of-way. And then North Carolina DOT has an ongoing partnership with Monarch Watch, and they've been putting in milkweed plugs to great success in North Carolina in their rest areas. Again, Texas DOT has been partnering with Adopt a Highway, but also with Fish and Wildlife Service to now put in rest area demonstration gardens in, I think, 4 initially. So I think the DOTs are really open, and for folks here too that are from the DOTs can comment with us in the public and the community-based organizations, and hopefully we'll have some immediate kind of early learnings or case studies even to maybe contribute to the working group's efforts. But yeah, if anyone has questions or comments or just wants to reach out to me later, just come on up and talk to me after this even.
I just wanted to say, because very often I hear the word milkweed without the, what I think is important associated phrase of nectaring plants.
Right.
Because the adult monarchs are going to not be able to use milkweed to feed on when they're not blooming. So there always has to be associated plantings that the adults will feed on. And I think it's important when we make these kind of statements about milkweed to include that phrase with it so that we don't leave the impression that milkweed is the only thing that's important.
Thank you. Thanks. Bonnie, I'm putting you on the spot, but I know you had an announcement you wanted to make.
Yes, related to all of this, I found out yesterday and told that it was okay to announce the Edison Electric Institute is in the process, if they haven't already completed it by today, getting the signatures they need with a memorandum of understanding that they now have with the Department of Interior and Department of Agriculture, that all their utility lines that run through federal lands that USDA and DOI or Interior manage, that would be National Park Service, Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, and there are more, I just don't know all of them. But all of those that those power lines cross will now have this memorandum of understanding, which means that they will indeed work together to be sure that they manage their vegetation in favor of pollinators. It's a good partnership.
Okay. Well, thanks, Lekha. We're going to actually our next, yes, please. Our next presenter is actually going to be another remote one, so we're really pushing our technology limits today. So we're going to do the quick setup for that, so maybe just 1-2 minutes, and we'll be with you with the next presentation.